Hi there, welcome again to Working Stress-Free. In this video I'm going to be talking about the subject of resistance to change. If you're working hard putting together a well thought through constructive stress management plan and you've made the business case so you're getting as many people on board as possible, you want everyone to be supportive of it so that it gets implemented and everybody benefits from it. One of the things you're going to encounter is a degree of resistance. It doesn't matter how great a relationship you have with your colleagues. Resistance is something you will encounter, and let me explain why. Have you ever gone to go and do something yourself personally, and maybe it's an ambition, a change of behavior, a resolution, for example. It's something that will be good for you, something you know is achievable, something that you know that when you do it, you will have improved. Everything's all stacked on your side. Yet for some reason you either didn't do it or you got going and then for some reason you stopped. Or you maybe even felt like you sabotaged your efforts. You got close to achieving a goal and then it was almost like a part of you that sabotaged it. Have you ever had that experience? I think most people have. And that's what resistance is. It's an unconscious process that keeps the status quo, keeps people where they are. There's a reason that goes on. Part of the human mind loves familiarity. So think of familiarity as being the same. Now, the same may not be right, but we're resistant to change. A lot of people would rather endure familiarity than go through all the work that needs to change. Familiarity is comfortable, even if it's not right. So the resistance is the unconscious mechanism helping you to avoid change. Does that make sense? In therapy, we call this secondary gain. Quite often, there's a secondary gain that people have by continue to do a totally dysfunctional behavior. Now, when it comes to workplace stress, you will encounter three types of resistance, and I'm sure some of these descriptions will resonate with you, with some of your colleagues, maybe even with yourself. And if it resonates with you, that's a good thing, because then you've revealed one of your own blind spots, and people are very resistant to seeing their own blind spots. So the three stress monkeys are see no stress, hear no stress, certainly don't want to talk about stress. And if you've ever been to a networking meeting and talked to people about stress, you will probably have encountered these three attitudes. So the first one, see no stress, is deniability. I don't see what the problem is. The second, hear no stress, is what I call diffusion of responsibility. It's not my problem. I don't hear it as an issue. It's got to be down to somebody else. The third one, don't talk about stress, is related to stigma. The stigma of even mentioning stress in the first place. So if you've been to a network meeting, you've probably been there with a glass of beer or warm white wine and talked about stress, and you may have heard somebody go, I don't see what the problem is. I'm not stressed. Therefore, they assume that other people aren't stressed. They do not even see it as an issue. It's a blind spot for them. That's deniability. It's a perspective where people go, I'm okay, therefore you must be okay. Now, if somebody has that attitude in your workplace, and especially if they're in senior management, you'll find that they may be resistant to even seeing and considering that your strategic plan is worth their time and effort. You need to make them aware of that resistance and overcome that. Otherwise, that resistance will be there and it will show up in the form of sabotage, and not deliberate sabotage necessarily, but quite often unconscious sabotage. People being too busy to do whatever needs to be done. They're too busy to implement all the workplace changes. Can you see how that resistance can show up? There's another reason why people have the deniability. It's that humans have this great propensity to be overly optimistic. There was some great research done where people were brought in, did a survey, and they were asked questions about risk. What are the risks of you getting cancer? What are the risks of getting a particular disease or being involved in a car accident or an aircraft accident? So they made their guesses. And then they were given the statistics. They were given the answers. And then they were retested. And most people still stuck to their original estimates. Even people that were given the statistics that 1 out of 2 people are going to get cancer, they were still put down the optimistic view that it won't be them. The statistics were wrong. So resistance in terms of deniability can quite often come about because people have this general optimism that we're going to be okay, everything's going to be fine. Let's not change the status quo. Let's just stay with what we're doing. Can you see how that can be a problem? Can you see how that can show up as people not being fully engaged? You want everybody on board to make sure that the plans that you put in place are effective. Now, the second stress monkey, hear no evil, this is when we get what's called diffusion of responsibility. People will hear what you've got to say, but it's not their problem. They don't see that it's a problem for them. And by the way, this happens even more if you're in a larger group, because people will go, well, it's not really my problem, and there's other people here that are they're better equipped, or maybe it's more their problem. So I'll leave it for them to pick up the program and to run with the program. It's their problem, it's not mine. Okay, diffusion of responsibility. This also shows up if you ever are misfortunate enough to have an accident and there happens to be a crowd of people around you. That's not great. You're better off only having 2 people. If there's only 2 people, they're more likely to step up and to offer assistance. If there's a crowd of people, diffusion of responsibility shows up, and a lot of people go, well, actually, I'm in a group here. There'll probably be other people that are better equipped and in a better place to be of assistance. I'll hold back. If that ever happens, you look around the group and go, you, come and help me. Okay? So diffusion of responsibility is a very subtle one, but you want to make people aware of it so that they overcome it, so they can't actually come from that attitude. It's also a very reactive attitude. You want to make sure that everybody in your team is proactive in terms of implementing your program, not reactive in terms of dealing with the problem when it's become a real problem. Okay? So that's the second stress monkey, hear no evil, diffusion of responsibility. So that takes us to the third stress monkey, speak no stress. Do not even want to admit to it. That's called stigma. I still can't believe that in modern day there is still a stigma around admitting to anyone in your business that you may be experiencing stress. If there is, it's generally because there's a problem with the culture. Because if someone can't step forward and go, hey, do you know what, I am struggling here, I am stressed, then they really don't have the support system to help them. And one of the reasons stigma is still such a problem is because people still regard being stressed as a sign of weakness. It can be a career limiting move, can it not, in some businesses to go, yeah, actually I'm struggling and I need some assistance here. A lot of people go, if I admit to stress, then suddenly I'm not going to be the next in line for promotion. There's also another issue, which is I've noticed this over the last sort of 5 to 10 years, that stress is now clumped in under the category of mental health. Now, that never used to be the case. I've worked with people who have mental health issues, bipolar, schizophrenia, Tourette's, epilepsy, all sorts of mental health issues. It never used to be that stress was in that category, but now we see it in the newspapers all the time about the mental health crisis in schools or with teachers or in the workplace. So for somebody nowadays to admit, hey, yeah, I'm stressed, straight away it gets put into the category of being a mental health issue. Nobody wants to admit, do they really, that they may have a mental health issue, although if they do have a mental health issue, one of the most important things to do is to step forward and look for assistance. So stigma is a real problem. How do we address this? Well, let's start with an assumption. Let's assume that you have a plan in place, you put the business case together, you've got a pretty good idea of the solutions that you're going to implement, and now it's a case of getting everybody on board so that they're all supportive, they all engage in the program, and it's a success. But the assumption we're going to make is there will be some resistance. There will be some hidden resistance for some of the reasons we've talked about earlier. Let's just go with that as an assumption, okay? Now, if we know that there's a potential problem going to come up, the resistance, what do we do? Well, most people will wait for the resistance to show so they can then deal with it. But that's a flawed strategy. If you can predict ahead of time that there's going to be resistance, the best thing to do is to raise the resistance as a subject first so you can inoculate against it so it doesn't ever happen. Okay? It's a bit like prevention rather than cure. It's a bit like with any inoculation, you take the jab so you don't get the flu. It's better to avoid the problem or to deal with the problem to make sure it's a non-problem than to have the problem occur and actually have to deal with it. Does that make sense? And what's even more effective is when the inoculation is given by the person who would probably have been resistant. We come back to something I was talking about in one of the earlier videos, which is if you present some information to someone, they can either accept it or they can be resistant to it. If someone acknowledges that stigma could be an issue, it's difficult for them to use stigma as resistance, isn't it? If someone admits that diffusion of responsibility could get in the way of a plan being effective, it's difficult for them to actually pass the parcel, pass the hot potato to someone else. So I'm going to give you a quick example of how to do this. So I'm not giving you the words, that's not what this is about. I just want you to get a sense of how you do this, okay? There are some people who don't even see that stress is a problem, and we put together a strategic plan for this company, and it's important that we get everyone on board. So I want to have a conversation with everyone in this room, and we're going to start off by just exploring what do you guys think could possibly get in the way. What are the attitudes that could possibly get in the way of this plan being fully implemented and being a success? Let's just explore that as a subject. What are the attitudes that anyone could have in this room that if they were to approach the plan and stick with those attitudes could actually get in the way of it being a success? Let's just explore that as a subject. Now, when you explore with your group that as a subject, people will put their hands up and go, well, maybe people don't want to talk about it. And they go, oh, good one, stigma. Yeah. People will come up with the idea of going, well, maybe it's not my problem. It's down to you. You're the HR department. Okay, diffusion of responsibility. Can you see that when you have an honest, open conversation with people and you allow them to come up and to reveal the resistance, as I said in the previous video, they take ownership of it. It becomes very difficult for somebody to stick with that attitude if they've already raised it as a possible resistance. Resistance becomes futile. Okay? This subject of resistance and how to inoculate and overcome it is a subject that a lot of people love to skim over. They'd rather it just didn't exist. However, I really implore you, spend some time reflecting upon this. And the reason is, if I'm coaching somebody, I want to make sure there's a minimal resistance to us going on the journey from where they are now to where they'd like to be. We want a smooth journey. And if you can reveal the resistance, whether that's a belief that somebody has or an attitude, it just makes that transition change from where you are now to where you'd like to be in the workplace so much easier. It's well worth putting in the effort to explore and reveal any resistance so that it doesn't happen. Now, to help you with that, I put together a very small ebook where I take you through the process, similar to what I just very quickly did, just very conversationally a moment ago. And you can download that. It's all for free. You don't even need to register for it. It's just there, something for you to read through and just to explore this whole subject of how you create the right conditions to overcome resistance so that your plans are effective and efficient. So, thank you for watching. If you've got any questions, comments, observations about this video or anything else to do with stress, then please contact me. I will answer them personally. And if there's somebody you know that would benefit from watching this, please like and please share. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.